Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Life Leader Show. I'm your host, Jason Wojo. On Life Leader Show, we help people make more, work less, and live awesome lives. I am joined by my co-host, Polish Peter.
Hey, so how is my work wife?
Your work
today?
Wife?
Talking to you, my work
you're talking
wife.
To me?
Yes, my work wife. How are you doing today, buddy?
How many wives do you have? I mean, you have a work wife, a wife, a gym wife. What else you got?
No, I just have work wife and a home wife.
Just two?
Listen, I know it's a joke, but this is why I bring it on today is because we're going to be talking about marriages today.
Yeah,
right?
Man, I'm super excited. So we are going to speak with and have an awesome conversation with John David Mann and Anna Gabriel Mann. And so you may, if you're watching right now, this is a book that is one of my favorites. It's called The Go-Giver. And John is one of the co-authors in this, and him and his wife, Anna, are putting together this Go-Giver marriage book, which I cannot wait for. And we have an awesome conversation about what it takes to succeed in a marriage. Like, what are the secrets of a lasting, passionate, amazing relationship?
Yeah. And I love having this particular conversation because these two look like they're amazing couple. They've been married for, I think he said 25 years.
25 years. Yeah.
That's
awesome.
A quarter of a century. So they know a thing or two about marriage, successful marriage. And, they look like they just got married basically. And what's the secret? So one of the things that we talked about in this particular podcast is they talked about one secret out of the book that they used, which was a really, really awesome thing.
Yeah, it really was.
We talked about different shifts in how you, the mindset and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited. Listen, doesn't matter whether you're married or you just have a relationship or you are just starting out in your marriage or you're halfway, you've been married for 5 years or a year, or you've been married for 20 years, or you're on the verge of divorce, or wherever you are in your relationship, in your life, in marriage, this is a podcast you need to listen to.
Absolutely. Let's jump in right now. Here's our interview with John David and Anna Gabriel Mann. John and Anna, welcome to Life Leader Show. I am so excited to have you guys on. You have no idea.
We've heard so much about you guys from Stu and Dave. We're so thrilled to be here.
Yeah. So Stu and Dave.
Hopefully it was good things.
Yeah.
it was great things. They wrote to me yesterday to tell us again how much they love you guys.
They are awesome guys. And when I found like amazing people, just know other amazing people. And hence here we are today connecting. And I got to tell you, I got this little book right here that I have read. See, this is how you know I've read it. And I've gone through it with notes as I have a little green sticker for it. And so this book is, it's highlighted everywhere, John. And this is The Go-Giver is the book I'm referring to. If you're listening right now and you're not watching us on video, this is one of my all-time favorite books. And that, I'm a pretty voracious reader, and I love the lessons that you covered in this. And so when I heard that you guys are writing The Go-Giver Marriage, I was like beyond myself. I'm like, this is going to be amazing. This is such an important thing. It's such a great topic. And I can't even imagine how much wisdom and benefit is going to come to people from you guys putting the time in to share this with the world.
How do you add anything to that?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you for the show. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. We'll do this again. Thank you. So go ahead, please.
I was going to say, so tell us, what was it about this topic and that brought you two together to decide to share this with the world and bring it out and write this?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit of the background of that. So first of all, The Go-Giver, and there's been a bunch of Go-Giver books since that time.
Yes.
The Go-Giver came out in 2008. So it's like a generation ago, practically. And it was years in development at that point. So the first very rough draft of the book came sliding out of my desktop printer in 2005. And Anna, who has read, I published over 30 books, and Anna's been the first reader on every book. She's my first and best most discerning reader. And so I always want to know what she thinks. And she always has great stuff to say. And she always knows how to say, this part doesn't quite work the way it is, but I see the potential there. And so, I listen to her. Smart men listen to women's advice.
That's right. Points there. Very, very well.
That's the principle number one, right?
That's right. And once again, we're done with the interview. She took the manuscript and said, she read it and she said, this is incredible. And she said, this describes what we do in our relationship. This is us. This would make a great book about marriage. So that's been on our minds, on our hearts, like in our stars, since almost 20 years ago. And it just to everything there was a season, right? It just took a while to mature. What happened was since The Go-Giver, there were a bunch of other Go-Giver books. Mm-hmm. So yeah. we went through, sales and leadership and influence, and eventually our chorus came around on the guitar. It was time to talk about marriage and relationships. For those of you who don't know The Go-Giver, it's billed as a business book, and it's published by a business publisher, and you'll find it on the marketing section of your local bookstore. It's about more than business. It's about life, but it's the Go-Giver principle, which is focusing on other people is not only a nice thing to do, it's a smart thing to do. It makes your own life richer. It's pragmatic. It was that principle, which we call the Pindar principle. The more you give, the more you have. Right? This book applied that principle to business. Our book applies that principle to relationships, and specifically marriage. But you could really apply it to any relationship. Anyway, where the story ends is that I'm a writer. But Anna has been a marriage therapist and coach, family therapist for her whole adult life. This is her training. This is her passion. So why did we want to write this book? Because it's what she does. And it's also who we are. It's like, these are lessons from our own marriage. We've been together for 25 years. And so this is like our love letter to the world.
I love that.
So this is something you guys co-wrote together.
Yes.
And Anna, is this your first book officially? Although it sounds like you've actually written a lot of the ones that you are not on the cover for.
The force behind the words.
Right.
I have been a strong editor on many books that John has written, but in the past, I've only published in psychology circles, journals, things like that, where I'm publishing on something specific, like, eating disorders or serious depression, entrenched depression, or addiction. There's just so many levels to what you can write about psychologically, codependent relationships. So now I this is my first published book, and it's very thrilling to me simply because John gave me free range to write my half of it, which typically when John writes a book, he actually interviews the author, the co-author, and he spends a lot of time with their material and really gets it down. And then he goes into his office, shuts the door, and writes the book. And in this situation, we were in the opposite ends of the house in our offices, whacking away on our computers. And I would send him my drafts and he would send me his drafts. And we would go back and forth. And then we'd go out for these long walks with our dog afterwards and talk over the details. But we spent probably 10 years developing the secrets just while we were out taking long walks in the evening, because we really wanted the secrets to be applied to real theory and to also be something that really met the Go-Giver. Because the Go-Giver, every secret in the Go-Giver, there's 5 secrets in the Go-Giver. And the first 4 are all about giving. But the 5th one is, it's really very opposite. It's about receiving. And so that is, there's that strength there in, 4 fingers and a thumb. And without that thumb, you can't pick anything up. So the 5th secret is always counterintuitive, if you will.
Right. And actually that is what, it's funny you mentioned that, because that is one of the lines that I have highlighted in the book where it talks about basically you are clogging up the system by not receiving, like by not, says, I love this. It says the secret to getting is giving, and the secret to giving is making yourself open to receiving. I was like, whoa, like I had an asterisk next to that line in here. And so what I love about what you just shared is that what I heard is you guys essentially not only developed the content for this book through your own relationship, but also through your research, through your training. And so we have a wide variety of input that is, kind of all culminating in this book. And quite frankly, the sequence and the process of which you guys wrote it together is in fact living out these principles, because you're each contributing, you're each doing these things. Tell us
Yeah.
So this is fantastic. Tell us more about the book. So it hasn't, and just listen, for everybody listening right now, you cannot go out and get this yet, with a caveat. This is being published on March 8th, but there is a special pre-order available. We'll talk about that at the end. So you're going to have to kind of hold off for just a second to read this, but tell us some of the things that we can look forward to learning when our listeners and viewers pick this book up.
Well, first, let me jump in and say that the book itself is it's like the other Go Giver books, but it's a little different in this way. It's in two halves. And the first half is a parable. It's a modern parable, like you've come to expect from a Go Giver book. It's a story about a young couple named Tom and Tess, who, their marriage is not about to blow up. It's not on the rocks. It's not at crisis point, but it's not all the way well either. They've just gone through 6 years of brutal misfortune in their lives, and a lot of stress. And so they're at this point where their marriage is suffering from the strains of life. And they encounter, we follow them through the course of a day, where they encounter various interesting personalities who in time reveal what we call the 5 secrets to lasting love. And the second half of the book is totally different. The second half of the book is not a story. The first half is called The Parable. The second half is called The Practice. And in the second half, Anna takes the story that I wrote in the first half and sort of unwraps it and explains from a theoretical foundation and also from a practical standpoint. It's like a step-by-step guidebook to what these 5 secrets are, how they work, why they work, and how you can apply them in your life, what that looks like. And, Bob and I have elements of that kind of how-to in all of our Go Giver books, but we felt that for this book, because it's so personal, it's about marriages, it's about relationships, we felt we really owed it to the readers to not just give them a story and say, good luck figuring this out, but to actually give them a detailed roadmap of what this looks like in a marriage, how you can apply this. So there will be people who jump in the story, and there will be people who jump at the guidebook, and probably everybody will end up reading all of it. That's the sequence of it.
That is phenomenal. I love that idea. And kudos to you guys for coming up with that, because I think, there are books that are very technical and they'll walk you through the steps, but you don't have any kind of vision for what this could look like or how this plays out in your life. Yeah. And so what you've done is essentially combine both of those with the parable, and then, with the principles, the steps, here's what's going on. And, I kind of think of, this isn't exactly analogous, but I think of some of the parables that Jesus told in the Bible, and the disciples were like, what did that mean? What are you talking about? He had to just explain it to them. And so now you guys are breaking this down in practical use. I mean, listen, our marriage is the most important relationship on this planet. There's not a single more important relationship. So giving that practical guidance is just so crucial. Why do you think we have so many issues with marriage these days, and our divorce rate is so high, and why are people so unhappy in these relationships? What are we dealing with here?
I love this question, actually. Number one, there's not a single person on earth who has escaped childhood without some scars and some wounds, whether they came at the hands of your immediate family, believe it or not, behind closed doors, in families across America, there is dark stuff happening sometimes. And so kids come out of childhood with their own brand of emotional baggage. And they bring that baggage into their marriage. In fact, they're seeking a marriage partner who will help them heal the baggage. And the example I'll use is this. Let's say that either you or Peter had a really, really dismissive and critical father, a guy that you could never measure up for, and who was always holding you to a standard that you couldn't possibly reach at the age of 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever. And so you came out of your family feeling a little bit like you wanted to tear the world apart and become successful to prove that you could. But there was another part of you that still had that place in you that didn't feel like you measured up, because that's the message your dad gave you. So you have a choice when you get married. You'll either be that guy, or you'll marry that person. And the way I phrase it all the time is, you know, the woman that has her hands on her hips before you get in the door, and, you know, whose favorite phrase is, honey, we need to talk. And, you know, that strikes fear in the hearts of men across America.
Right. Those words, look out, fellas.
Exactly. So, but this is a real phenomenon. When you get into a marriage, those, you know, the minute the honeymoon's over, you know, when you're in the kiss of romance and everything is just rosy, you know, everything's great. There's no issues at all. But once you get into daily life and the romance has started to slow down, maybe you've had a baby and other things are going on. You've had to move, you had a job change, you got, you know, stationed in Afghanistan. You know, I mean, things happen in a marriage, and loneliness enters, and just, you know, all kinds of things can happen. All of a sudden, these bags start unpacking. And what happens in the marriage is that you're both in reaction to those bags unpacking. You know, the minute she or he is critical, the other person says, wait a minute.
I didn't sign up for that.
Yeah, I didn't sign up for this. Cut it out right now. And there's still that reactive place in you that wanted to smack your dad for being so critical, but you were a little kid. That wasn't going to be possible. But now you're in a face-to-face relationship with somebody where you can really let them have it with both barrels. And that's really what starts to happen in marriages, is that whatever our material is, it starts to emerge. You know, if you grew up feeling out of control in an alcoholic family, then maybe you're a really controlling person who's always trying to control everything. And, you know, for your spouse, that can be really hard. And each one of our secrets, as I said, has an opposite. And so we address all these issues. We address criticism and control and, you know, all those things that can just enter into the marriage and make it start to feel hard, not as romantic. You know, you lose your edge there. So but at the same time, a marriage that you're feeding, and John has these trees behind us because in the center of the story is a beautiful fable. And the fable has a tree at the center of a marriage. And you're either feeding the marriage or you're starving the marriage by the way that you behave and the way that you bring yourself to the marriage. And so each secret is about giving. It's still about the same concepts of the original Go-Giver, adding value to your spouse's life. That's powerful, because if you're continually looking for ways to give to your spouse, this is not about martyrdom or about being a doormat. It's about actually feeding the marriage, because we have this symbol in the book. It's two circles and they intersect. And in the place where they cross, there's a third entity and a little elliptical space. And so there's each individual, both separate, but then there's the marriage itself. And it's like a third entity in the room that you're either feeding or you're starving. And so that's one of the premises underneath the book is, you know, you have an opportunity to take care of your marriage in a way that will allow healing to happen when those issues come up. Because with compassion and kindness and a certain degree of emotional intelligence about what you're doing together, it doesn't matter what comes up. You can talk it through. You can heal.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback what Anna said. By, you know, when the two of you are in stress, or let me say that more accurately, when the two of you become in conflict, even in little ways, in small ways, just a little bit of criticism or a little bit of irritation or a little bit of defensiveness, whatever the situation. When you get into a situation of conflict, now there's you and me in the room. It's just two of us. When you get into a situation of interaction, collaboration, you know, empathy, of generosity, of sharing something that you enjoy, then this thing occurs that I was talking about, which is the us. She says the overlap, the marriage, Anna calls it the us. So there's you and there's me and there's this thing called the us. And the whole idea is all these dysfunctional patterns that we brought them from childhood, or we learned them from peers, or from movies or TV, or wherever we got them from, social media, who cares, wherever they came from. These dysfunctional patterns all starve the us. They all focus on the me. They all focus us on ourselves, on our suffering, on how we've been wronged by the other party. And what we're trying to do is shift the focus from me to us. It's not just from me to you, Because you're either, as Anna just said, you're either feeding the us or you're starving the us. It's never neutral. It's a living thing, so it's never stationary. It's always growing or it's not. It's like Andy Dufresne said in Shawshank Redemption. It comes down to a simple thing, really. Get busy living or get busy dying. Or I think he just said the other way, get busy dying or get busy living. Anyway, that's the deal here. It's the us is either being nourished or it's being starved. And so that's, kind of back to your question, Jason, about what's going on with marriages and all the divorce. And it's not just the divorce, Ray. It's all of the marriages across the land that don't get divorced, that stay married their whole lives, but they're not happy.
Yeah.
That's not successful marriage just because they didn't get divorced, or they're mildly happy. They're sort of like they've settled for a situation that's like, it could be worse. That's not very joyous.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I love what you guys are sharing. Anna, you just dropped some major powerful points here as you were talking about the, how we bring in our young self into our marriages and things like that. And I truly, truly believe that. And one of the things that I've heard from you is one, we bring our younger self into the marriage. Two, I get a sense that what you guys are saying is that we actually attract that spouse that's either going to fill that void, right? And then we're surprised, like, what? Why is this person that way, right? And then three, I also heard that it's interesting, like this thing that I have up here, but Tony Robbins talks about where focus goes, energy flows. And what you guys are talking about here is, think about focusing on the marriage, right? Focusing on them, you, as opposed to me, and more importantly, us, right? And that is a powerful, powerful statement. So I do have a question of all that I just asked is, do you feel that we do attract that spouse? Like subconsciously on some level, we look for that person to fill that void, whatever it might be for us. And then the marriage is a great opportunity to either we grow to become a better person in that, or we go and complete the opposite of it.
I love it when the host just like nails the concept. That is exactly it, Peter. Yes, in fact, we do attract that spouse because, and I think this is the power of it, we are constantly seeking to heal, to become a better and stronger person. I think that the drive for personal growth that heals us is very profound. And so, yes, we do seek that partner. And depending on that's why divorce is so high. Because, and I'll share with you, years ago in my practice, I had a couple where the husband had been very brutally beaten by his father continually. And he was, his father was very angry. His father was alcoholic. His father picked on him, and he was the oldest, and he got the brunt of his father's abuse. And when his father was drunk, there was more abuse. And his father, the numbers of things his father did that were just horrendous were just over the top. I would get out of session sometimes and weep because it was that dark. And in the marriage, he had become the guy who was just the strong, silent type. He didn't interact with his wife. He didn't interact with his children. His wife was this lovely, lovely person who had great emotional ability. And so she really was always trying to be there for him, but he was shut down. He was just shut down. And they were on the verge of just disaster. It was going to end because the kids, if they needed anything, went to mom. The kids were really tight and really close to mom. And, when he finally broke down and actually cried, it was because his entire world was separate from him. He was a lonely, lonely person. And he was the one that had shut it all off. He didn't have the ability to interact because he was that angry guy that his father was. And he felt it was better to just shut down than it was to bring that side of himself to his kids. Yeah. And he did occasionally snap at them. So when they finally started really talking through it, and the father started really, the husband really started doing his own personal work and healing, the whole marriage took a different shift. And he started really telling her things about his childhood. She was very compassionate. They went through a major transition, and this took over a year. but they healed a very, very deep wound. And they went on to be a very happy couple with not even a sign of divorce. And so, yes, it took some work. I mean, it was really a tough journey, but when there's been profound and difficult things in a childhood, you definitely carry it into your relationships because you're trying to heal it still. Mm-hmm. You don't know it. It is unconscious, but you are trying to heal it.
I was just going to say, as I'm listening to you, Anna, I think I had a couple of examples myself that struck me. Like I know I have a friend who had controlling parents, and he found a controlling wife. And maybe, and tell me if I'm processing this correctly, but I'm wondering if like he thought that he could overcome the controlling tendencies that he grew up with by changing his wife, and therefore healing as a result of that, and healing that childhood trauma by changing his wife from being controlling to I guess, I don't know, maybe this fixer mentality that some people have. I don't know if that's totally off or related at all.
Well, and she might have grown up feeling out of control too, because usually the one who grows up feeling out of control becomes the controller. Okay. So they were probably competing to see who would control.
So that's phenomenal. And the other thing that you just said, I want to touch on before I forget, is people are bringing this into their relationship subconsciously. So in my, what I'm thinking is like, it takes an incredible degree of awareness, of humility, like realizing that you have baggage. It takes a huge level of vulnerability, like opening yourself up to this possibility that you might have some stuff going on, and opening that and being vulnerable with your spouse. Like all of these seem like part of this process to getting through these things.
It is. And when you are vulnerable to your spouse, I can promise you the intimacy will open up and get better. Because that is a really powerful thing. Yeah. I think that with that, I just listened to a podcast about sex, and they said, men have, excitement and arousal, and they're like ready to go. But women have
That's
several.
Not true.
And that women have several steps between that, to get to arousal and ready to go. And that men often are like they're like, the dog going, like, what? Forgive the analogy. But, they're ready, and she's not quite, but it doesn't mean she's saying no. So I just think it's a, when you open the door to being vulnerable with your spouse, that's actually one of the things that she wants. Men sometimes think that women want them to be the tough guy, but men who really open up to their wife about what they're struggling with, and John's like a master at this. I mean, we've been together 25 years, and there's been moments where he'd just stop, and I knew he was having a bad day. And all I had to say was, I'm here if you need to talk. And if there's anything I can do to make your day better, just let me know. And, he might keep working, but then he would go around and come back to it. I know he wants to add something.
However, I want to say, when I arrived and when we arrived at the relationship that we have, and when I first got to know Anna, which was for us fairly later in life, it was in our 40s, not in our 20s. So I had been through relationships before. I'd had a previous marriage, and so I consider myself at that point in my life reasonably intelligent guy. I could figure a lot of things out. I had a lot of opinions and views about a lot of things. I could discern a lot of things. But honestly, when it came to my own feelings, I was like an ignorant guy. I mean, when it came to my own feelings, I didn't have ready access and clear, articulate understanding of what was going on in my own self. So Anna would say sometimes, so, what's going on for you? And I would get flustered. And I could even feel my face get red. And I would get flustered not because she was interfering with my life, or not because she was being nosy, but because, why was I feeling that way? Well, it would turn out I was feeling that way because I didn't really know what I was feeling. I couldn't actually answer the question. What's going on for you? I don't know. All I know is
more frustrated.
Yes, exactly. I don't know. All I know is that I feel bad. And in conversations with Anna, I became much more familiar with exploring that territory myself. I became much more able to articulate what was going on for me and became more aware of that and could sort of sort through things and walk through those corridors of my own internal experience. The point that I'm making is not just to share my odyssey. The point that I'm making is that this is an example for me, an example of the potential of marriage, the opportunity of marriage. And it's not just because Anna is a therapist. I believe that your spouse is put here to help you become a better person. Your spouse is here to help you grow into the person that you could be. You know, there's this wonderful line in the movie, As Good as It Gets. Jack Nicholson plays this misanthropic, cranky old romance writer who hates people, and Helen Hunt is the waitress, and they are, you know, the unlikely match of this particular movie. And right at the end of the movie, he's explaining to her that he's finally taking a medication to curb his OCD, and he hates medications, but he says he's taking it anyway. He says, "You make me want to be a better man," and her face just transforms, because that's the moment when when the relationship finally clicks. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Your spouse is put there on earth to make you a better person, and the honest truth is that's not always a comfortable process.
Yep.
It's not always an easy process, but it's such a rewarding process. And it becomes more and more easy and more comfortable and more rewarding. The more you catch on to this is what's going on. You know, she's not put there to test you and make you miserable. Right. She's not put there to test your patience or to cause you to have to compromise the way you like to do things. Yeah, it's the opposite. It's put there to make you stretch and grow.
Yeah, I love that. I love that
awesome
perspective, because it just shifts how you view the marriage, how you look at your spouse. And it's interesting when you get into those arguments, when you're like, the level of like argument is like up here, and remembering that in that moment, that's what it counts. All right. So listen, I know you guys mentioned to us before the podcast, there is a whole bunch of little secrets that you guys have in that book that you guys revealed to the audience. Would you be open to maybe sharing one or two of them with us? Give us a little glimpse.
Yes, we would love to. But before we do, I want to mention one other concept that that is not a secret, but it is a powerful, powerful thing that we feel the book really pushes in every secret. And it is that every marriage has a scorecard. Every person in a marriage has a scorecard. And that is what we call the little me saying, wait a minute, this isn't fair. I'm not getting what I deserve. I'm not getting what I want here. And so you're scoring with your spouse back and forth. It's like a ping pong game. Who's right? Who's wrong? I did the dishes 3 times this week. What have you done? I was up all night long with the baby. Why do you, make your own coffee?
I work so hard to make all this money that pays for this house.
Yeah.
On and on, right?
Tit for tat kind of thing.
Say more about it, John, because you really are good at illustrating it.
No, I have no idea what you're talking about. I never do that.
Not from experience, of course.
Yeah.
See, we don't really keep score, but I think I keep score less than Anna does. Yeah, I mean, and it's so interesting. It's kind of a way of first of all, it's a way of keeping us, you and me, and not us. But the scorecard is, it's like, goes back to the Go-Giver. It's like it's the principle of economics. Economics, they call this the dismal science, right? Economics is the study of loss, of spending. Economics is the study of what happens when you give something up, basically. Because if I give you 50 head of cattle, now I'm 50 head of cattle poorer. If I give you three rubies, I've lost my gems. You have them, but I don't. It's kind of a zero-sum game. You win, I lose. I win, you lose. But human experience doesn't work like that. Human experience is the opposite. Human experience is strange. Because when I give you my attention, if I give you my respect, I don't lose respect, I gain more. And this is strange because I gave you something and now I have more of it, even though I gave it to you. If I give you love, if I give you compassion, if I give you attention, if I give you encouragement, if I mentor you, the times in my life where I've learned the most about writing were the times when I've been mentoring somebody in their writing. I give them my time and attention and I learn more. That's strange, but it is. It's weird math. And love is the weirdest math of all. So what you need to do in a marriage and long-term relationship with this person you love is to understand that this is not mathematical. It's not arithmetic. It's not, well, if I give up something to you, then I lose out. We both get richer. So that's, scorecard is antithetical to that. That's why we say, toss the scorecard. But it's hard to do. It's hard to do. This is going to get back to Peter's question to Anna, which I know she's going to answer. I really do. Getting rid of the scorecard is easy to say, really, really hard to do because it is addictive. It is actually an addiction. Criticism is an addiction. Keeping score is an addiction. It's almost a compulsion. It's really easy to do because it cuts a neural groove where you have this habit that you're just so used to that you can stop yourself from doing it for a moment. And then 3 minutes later, when you're not focusing on it, it slips back in again. It's a habit and it's an addiction. So the way you break it, you can't break a bad habit by focusing on the bad habit. Only way you can break a bad habit is by flipping it and installing a good habit, a positive habit. So all 5 of these so-called secrets, they're really just positive habits. They're little things you can do every day in your relationship that start to create that shift of mindset that have you feeding the us instead of starving the us.
That sounds amazing.
Over to you, sweetheart.
All right. So I'm going to share with you. Now, we always say we have 5 secrets and we don't have any favorites. But I sort of do have a favorite here. and I'll tell you why. The most profound need that we have as children is to be seen, heard, and witnessed. It is the number one thing that we want the most. We want our parents' attention. We want their praise. We want them to love us in a very tangible and straightforward way. And when we become adults, we just don't get enough of it. Who has a boss who tells them every day how great you're doing? Very few of us. Right. And you get into the work world and you really might have somebody who is actually trying to take your job. So there's a great deal of stress. You're working as hard as you can, trying to be as impressive and strong as you can, and do a good job. So we get home to our marriage and, we're pretty beat up by the outside world. And now we've entered the world of family and our marriage. And that could be breaking down in chaos. There could be a sick baby. The house could be a mess strewn with toys. There's no dinner in sight. It can be really hard. So this secret is called appreciation. It's the very first secret in the book. And appreciation is one of the most powerful things that we all need. It fills a gap that is so strong. And when we say take the time every day, and usually I start people I'm coaching or people I'm working with starting with 3 times a day. I want you to find something about your wife or your husband that you completely love. And it could be something you notice in the moment. It could be the way they talk to your children in that moment. But find something that you love, and then doesn't have to be right that minute, but take the time in the next hour or 2 to stop them and say, when we were making dinner and you were talking to the kids and you just got them to stop fighting and you calmed them down, and they were just so happy afterwards because you're so loving and you're always generous with them. And it just makes me feel so glad that you're the mother of our children or you're the father of our children. And so I just want you to know, I really appreciate who you are as a parent. Boom. For the other person who receives that, I had one guy well up with tears in the kitchen and say to his wife, you have no idea what this means to me. I want more than anything to be a good father. that's a huge, big deal for me. And she said, well, I just want you to know, and I'm going to tell you every day what a good father you are. And he said, that would be good for me. And, but that was only one thing that she complimented him on that day. I say compliment, but it's really, she appreciated him. And it's so easy to do, but in the busyness of life, in the, coming and going, and we're all so, there's so much going on, and, you know, there's a kid screaming in the corner, and, you know, trying to have dinner and a conversation at the same time. And you've got a baby wailing and another kid trying to get everyone's attention. And, you know, it's like, this is life. This is real life. So it's just critically important that you just carve the minute. It takes a minute to make that appreciation happen. Carve the minute and make sure your spouse knows all the ways that you love her or him, and make sure that you express it, not as a, you know, and I tell people all the time, you can say to your wife, "You're looking great in those jeans, babe." You know, that's a really sweet way to appreciate your wife, but it's a passing flirtation, if you will. Take the time for 3 to 5 really concrete moments where you let your spouse know how much you adore her or him, and what it is they're doing that you love.
That's, go ahead, dude. Sorry, John.
I was going to say, and by the way, you know, that's it can be something that's just simple and pragmatic. Like, Anna frequently thanks me for taking out the trash, and taking out the trash for me is not a big deal. Actually, we have a place in New England, and it is a very big deal because the driveway is half a mile long. It's all uphill. So I really appreciate the thanks. That one, you're very welcome. Thank you for the thank you.
But just exercise, right? Just
exactly,
that part
yeah.
of it, yeah.
What can I say? But I tend to handle things like bills and payments in the house. But for some reason, when we're not, you know, we don't work for companies, we're self-employed. So we had to get some health insurance years ago. We had to shop for health insurance, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. It just seemed so daunting to me. The whole world of health insurance just looked like it was a mountain I didn't even know how to climb. And I just picked it up and did it. And this years and years later, I still thank her for being the one who, you know, who picked up the hammer and anvil and went and nailed down the, I think it's the wrong tools I just said, but anyway, nailed down our health insurance. So it can be simple, pragmatic things like that, or it can be things like Anna was saying, how you talk to our kids. I just so appreciate the way you talk to people. I so appreciate the way you really think through things before you give your opinion, and how thoughtful you are. And what I want to add to this, what Anna described about this isn't always easy for people. Frequently, it's not easy. On the one hand, we just forget. And so it's worth it to spend the time, do the research, actually sit down with a pad of paper and think about it ahead of time. You can do that. You can sit down and make a list. It's like a gratitude list. In the morning, at night, sit down whenever you have free time and say, now, what are 3 things that I love about my spouse that I love? You know, that are specific and that are important. To just write them down. That's okay to do. It's not cheating. It's okay to put it in your calendar. It's okay to do whatever it takes to start to get the habit, because it may not come naturally at first. And it also may feel weird. It's easy for us in this podcast to be saying these things, right? But often, you know, guys will come back and say, I feel like an idiot, right? Honey, I got to talk to you. And it's like, no, nothing's wrong. Everything's okay. But it's just, I just want to say, I really appreciate who you are. Yeah. Like, what am I talking about? Whoa. You know?
What did you do? Yeah. What do you want?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Where are the roses? You must be up to something.
What will I find out that you have done when I wasn't?
What do you want? Yeah.
So it's okay. And this is going back to what you said, Jason. It's okay if it's awkward. It's okay if you feel like an idiot afterwards. She will love you for that, actually. And you'll feel less like an idiot. You'll feel less awkward. And it does. Somebody used the word vulnerable here earlier. It does make you vulnerable. Just the little thing of telling somebody how you appreciate them. It makes you vulnerable in a way that may feel strange and new and not entirely pleasant at first. It's worth it. It's worth it because this is the road in.
And you're shifting the focus, how you look at that particular person.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So let me bring that opposite, because the opposite is really powerful. The opposite of appreciation is criticism. And criticism is a really difficult pattern to break for people sometimes. Sometimes people just get in a habit of saying, why did you do it that way? I mean, come on. You know, or whatever it is, you know, it's like, no, we don't slice the tomatoes that way. I like the cucumbers peeled, please. You know, it's like, you can find a million ways to say things that aren't exactly friendly. And if you're criticizing your spouse, criticism is actually considered, according to a major researcher in America, John Gottman, criticism is considered one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
For marriage.
In a marriage. And that is that continual criticism in a marriage will shut down the marriage really fast. So if either spouse is really in that habit of picking at the other one or picking apart the way they behave or things they do, then that will have such an impact over the long haul. And so it's again, as John said, it's a groove in your brain. It's important to get out of the negative groove and get into the positive groove. So
with that, Anna, I have a serious question right now. Is it silverware up or down in the dishwasher? Because this is like something. So I would say the smart man knows that it's whichever way she wants it. That's
so
right.
is it 67 degrees in the house or 69 degrees in the house?
Right. So, well, there's so many opportunities, I think, when you're in a relationship you could find anything like, hey, you didn't put the bed sheets on. I mean, you got to realize like this is not serving you. The other thing I love and I see why, I understand the rationale, John, why you brought up the scorecard first, because if you're holding a scorecard, you're going to be like, well, I'm not going to give them, appreciate them because I'm still ahead. They still owe me. They should be appreciating me. They should be appreciating me. Like, and so you got to get rid of that. Like, that's such a big thing. And the other thing that I heard on it as well is that with the example you gave, I love it. About the talk in the kitchen. And I'm wondering as well, and John, you kind of alluded to this, is like, maybe you just start with something small that doesn't make, if you've never given your husband or wife a compliment and you come out with something heartfelt, maybe you start that way. I don't know. Or maybe you start smaller and work your way up. Do you guys have any advice on that? Like, do people just jump in to the deep end of the pool, or do they start small?
For me, I think you start out with what comes to mind.
Okay.
And frequently that is, what you'd say, start small. Frequently it's something very specific and very, it's like we give an example in the book of a guy we were asking this question to, and he was saying, this is often the place where we start in workshops. Is often where Anna starts in counseling is, or coaching. Used to be a counselor. Now she functions more as a coach, is give me three things that you love about your spouse. And frequently what people will come up with is like, three things. And they'll come out with something that just is so simple. Like in this case, this guy says, I love her salads. Well, say more about that. Well, I grew up, I always hated salad dressing. It always came out of a bottle. I never experienced a really good salad dressing. And my wife made this like salad dressing from scratch. I don't know how she did it. I don't know what was in it, but it was amazing. And, but that's ridiculous, right? That doesn't count. And no, it counts.
Yeah.
Anything counts. The smallest thing, because here's the point. Big shifts are built out of small changes. This is true in finance. It's true in business. It's true in health and fitness. And it's true in a relationship. It's not built out of big, sweeping, dramatic gestures. It's built out of the little things you do every day. And so, in the book, there's an example of in the story, Tom and Tess, there's an example of a woman who all she could think of is he makes a wicked lasagna. Okay, that's a start. Good start.
Yeah.
That's a good start.
And what I'm imagining, and what I'm imagining happens as well is like because you talked about habits, right?
Yeah.
And consistency. And my suspicion is that as you start to look for this actively, more things all of a sudden become available that previously you haven't even thought of that you appreciate. You're like, wow, I really do appreciate that. It's like, what Peter mentioned, where you focus on, now you start this new pattern in your relationship that can only lead to great things. And quite frankly, probably reciprocation. Like they're going to start thinking of you differently and looking at you differently as well.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
And little things like the cooking, that is, John's the grill master at our house, but he's not just the grill master, the salmon or the steak or whatever he's making, it's perfect. So it means that I don't even have to think about that. I could just get the salad and the potatoes or whatever else is going with it together. And I don't have to think about that. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that he's so meticulous. So I constantly let him know. And it's like, these are the things that make people go, oh yeah, I'm the grill master, it's
right.
Like,
I'm the dude.
Well, now you're making me hungry.
I know. Right.
The thing you said, Jason, about when, it starts to kind of go into momentum, it's like, there's a line in the book that says, every individual is an undiscovered continent. And it's an unmapped continent. We call this your treasure hunt sometimes, when you start looking for things to appreciate. Because if you want to start appreciating things out loud in words, first you have to see them. And to see them, you may first need to go looking, because it's just not been your habit. I mean, when you were first in love, you couldn't see anything else.
Yep.
Every second, right? You say, "Oh my gosh, your eyebrows are amazing." There's this line. If you remember the movie English Patient, there's one point where the guy is talking to his colleague and he says, "What is the little part of the neck right here called?" And the guy looked at him and just said, "Oh, you got to pull yourself together." But that's when you're first in love. Then you forget, because all these other things happen, kids and finance and household and jobs, and the world is at your throat. And so you forget these things. You may need to get the habit back and go looking. That's your treasure hunt. And you said it right. The more you go looking, the more there is to find. And, here we are decades later, Anna and me, we're just, people would for years would ask us, "What's your secret sauce, you guys?" Because you act like newlyweds and you're not. Well, maybe we are. Exactly. It's like it is new every day. I know so much about Anna, but I also know there's so much I don't yet know. There's so much to find out still.
Wow. What an attitude and a perspective to have on your spouse, and how can it not be amazing and new? And of course, there's challenges always, like you mentioned, but what a different framework of a successful relationship. Guys, we only covered one of the 5 secrets, and we're running out of time here, but I want to, how do people get this book? It's on pre-order now. I want everybody that is listening or watching right now to pick this up, because I know it's going to be amazing. So tell me more about this.
So we built a website for the book. It's simply called, all one word, gogivermarriage.com. gogivermarriage.com, and no hyphens or anything. And at gogivermarriage.com, you read a little bit about the book. You can pre-order the book. And actually, if you pre-order the book, go to our site and plug in your order number, we created a couple of bonuses, for those people. And those include 2 video masterclasses that Anna and I shot from our living room couch. One is on the mindset of lasting love, and the other one is called Dealing with Conflict. And then you will also get a 1-minute screen test with Anna and me and our dog. That's a bonus. And then the other free gift for the pre-order folks is we're holding a fireside chat, a live via Zoom fireside chat 2 weeks after the book launches in later March, which is it's a fireside chat, we call it, and we'll have a Q&A session, interactive with people. So anybody who's on it can put their questions in the comments, and our moderator is going to be Dan Rockwell, our friend Dan, who is the creator of the popular Leadership Freak blog. And it's one of the most popular leadership blogs in the world. And Dan is a wonderful, wonderful man, big fan of our book. We're a big fan of his stuff. In fact, a secret, Dan and I are writing a book together.
You heard it here.
Not out yet. But Dan is going to be our host, so he'll be the moderator, taking your questions and feeding them to us and kind of making the whole thing work. And so that's just for people who pre-order the book, and you can do that through our site. And
the deadline for that is March 7th. Is that correct? Or how does that work?
I mean, the book goes on sale March 8th. So at midnight, March 7th, boom, that's no more pre-order.
Go out, everyone, right now. And right now, like you're on this podcast, go listen. Go register and get the pre-order right now. John and Anna, it has been an extreme privilege and honor. I love what you're contributing. I love what you're doing. Love your hearts. And I can't wait to see this book blow up for you guys, and you get to impact relationships and by default, the community and the world around us, just by doing this. So thank you so much for doing Life Inner Show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Dude, I can't wait to read this book. I'm going to pre-order it here in a minute. And there's no more important relationship in your life than your marriage. And what a great tip they gave. I mean, we talked about many things, but I want to talk a few things kind of hit upside the head. The first one is this, she only gave 1 out of 5, right? But the appreciation, what a difference that can make, and looking at, and it's not just saying it, I think, but even the mindset that can occur and the shift in perspective when you actually look at your spouse and you look for something to appreciate. Cause it's so easy to look for the faults, and they didn't do this. They left their shoes on the floor. They, didn't clean up themselves in the sink. Like, but what if you had this perspective of appreciation? Like, how could that change things?
Yeah. And it is sometimes, especially depending where you're at in your marriage or in your relationship, it could be very difficult to find that one little thing that you might appreciate about that other person, right? Yeah. So finding the little glimpse and looking from that perspective. And here's the thing. I don't think it only fills the other person up, but we talked about on the podcast, right? Like when you appreciate something, when you use the example of in a kitchen, the conversation in the kitchen, when they talked about that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden that husband got filled up, right? Like, man, that's the only thing I'm striving to be a great father, a great husband. So thank you for acknowledging that. Yeah. But I think what also happens, it fills your own bucket. When you go and appreciate somebody else, right? It fills you up, makes you feel a lot better, right? And especially the person that you married, you're saying this is the most important person in my life.
Well, it's so funny how, like, when you first start a relationship, like, they can do no wrong. They're walking on water. Yeah. And then kind of as life sets in and the novelty wears off, we all of a sudden, this filter is removed, and all of a sudden all we see is the negative things, the things we don't like. And I think, what if you kept it? And I'm not saying you have to live in a bubble and pretend that everything's perfect when it's not, but I promise you, if you take the time to look, I'm sure there's a lot of things you could appreciate. And I love what you said, man, about it. It opened it up for yourself as well. Because you may even find parts of your own life that you now can appreciate more fully because you're realizing that in other situations. And in this case, your spouse. I think one of the things that struck me here is, like, it has to be genuine. You have to really find something that can be hard. Like, I think if you are used to kind of like this, I don't want to say a blah relationship, but like you guys kind of like just, go through life together. You gotta find something genuine, and you gotta, like, really, really mean it and be consistent with it. Because I think, saying it periodically, probably, you want it to be regular, right? You don't want it to be just like once every quarter, right?
Right. And I think the other aspect that comes into play here is they mentioned that during that podcast is vulnerability, right? And I think when you come to appreciate somebody, there's got to be some vulnerability that comes from you to be able to go and appreciate them fully in a most authentic kind of a way, right? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be something huge, for some, they mentioned, I think, he talked about at one point this, for some men, it's really hard to figure out what that is, right? So just starting off with one little thing, I appreciate you for being you. Yeah. She might ask, like, well, what does that mean? Well, I mean, like she mentioned it, like, oh, you look good in those jeans, right? That's something that can be used for anybody, I think. So looking from those little perspectives, I think it's going to shift the thinking in the overall picture of the marriage. Because what ends up happening is that when you look at problems, we start looking at the little things here and there, right? And
who hasn't had that fight where, like, it starts off as one thing and all of a sudden it's a laundry list. Well, and then it becomes a battle. Like, you're trying to win because you got more ammunition than them, and all of a sudden what started over this tiny little thing that wasn't even true, that you got a whole thing of things that you didn't have resolved. And so I think that's a big part there. The other thing that just struck me is like, some people, I think the reason why we may not give this acknowledgement and appreciation is because we ourselves are sometimes uncomfortable with accepting that. It's almost like, people that are uncomfortable with accepting gifts or receiving gifts, and we shortchange the giving cycle when we do that. But some people probably don't give it because they are uncomfortable with themselves receiving it. And so that's probably a reason as well.
Dude, I totally agree with it because I went through that cycle myself. You know what I mean? I love giving to other people for whatever reason, right? For whatever it is. But if somebody wants to give me something, I have to accept that help or whatever. It was very difficult for me. So like the Go Giver book, that played a huge role in it. And I'm sure that this Go Giver marriage book is going to be touching about accepting it. I think she kind of mentioned it at one point about, there was that aspect of it. How do you actually receive it? Because in marriage, that's important too. Because think about it. If I'm giving it and I'm giving appreciation, but the other person doesn't want to receive it, it's kind of hard, right? So there's
you feel rejected, and you're not, that hurt. That's not,
Yeah. The other thing that just popped into my head, man, that was important now, the child that she talked about growing up, right?
Yeah.
You are kind of like the child wants to be acknowledged in when you're a kid, when you're a teenager, when you're an adult. And then when you get in the marriage, we look for that spouse. Somehow we tend to attract that person that helps us, if you look from that perspective, helps us grow, be better in life. And because we tend to attract it. So that person that you married, consider that there is a reason why you married the person that's helped you grow, be better and bigger and whatever it is in life to be able to rock out. So
totally, man. A couple other takeaways that I had was it struck me when John said, like, hey, he said in passing, but he said, the measure of a successful marriage just isn't if you haven't gotten divorced. And I'm like, wow, like that's so true. Like of the 50% of marriages that are not divorced, that doesn't mean you're winning. That means you're just enduring more, right? Like how about
your roommates?
Yeah. How about if you didn't have to endure? How about if you didn't have to just kind of like, okay, I'm stuck with them. I don't want to get divorced. It's cheaper to keep them, right? That kind of stuff. Right. What if you could you're with them, make it awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a really important aspect because I think when you start looking from that perspective, you start seeing, okay, let's turn this around. Let's turn the ship around. Yeah. And I think this Go Giver book is going to really help people make those little shifts because they mentioned one point, sometimes the little things that makes a big impact, right?
Yeah.
So those little things, appreciating somebody,
right?
Saying what it means to you or doing the little things or whatever it might be. And I'm sure that I'm going to talk about in this book.
Well,
is going to open up.
Dude, and the last thing I'd say, in order to do any of this, you got to get let go of the scorecard. Listen, you may think you're winning, meaning like, oh, you do things right and they're the ones that are the problem. And you're never going to open up and do this if there's not that, you got to let go of it. You're not, Tony Robbins talks about this is like horse trading, right? And like, keeping a scorecard here, like we talked about, like you got to let go of that. You just got to.
Yeah. Marriage is not about me. Marriage is not about really you, right?
Yeah.
It's about us, and you look at the bigger picture. And when you start looking like you mentioned just Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins says, if we all lived in a honeymoon phase our whole life, the marriages wouldn't follow in divorce. Think about it. If you just were honeymoon the whole time, you wouldn't need to be divorced. So on that note, to wrap up this particular episode, my work wife, I appreciate you, buddy, for all the things that even the fact that you show up like a minute before we have to get up on stage. I still appreciate that you show up there so I don't have to do all kinds of different things.
And I appreciate you for your hair, for your
somebody's got to do it
for appealing to our international audience.
That's right.
And
that sexy accent. That's right.
That's right. Well, listen, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed talking with John and Anna. I really do recommend you go out and pre-order that book. It's coming out March 8th. Go to their website, gogivermarriage.com to pre-order a copy and get some awesome special gifts in the process. If you would like to be part of this conversation, Peter, we are ramping up our presence online. We want to see you and be part of the community. And so with that, also share this, this, subscribe. Like these are the things, this is the way we reach people, right? Is through this message. And so until next time, we appreciate you for listening and we will see you next week, everyone. Take care.